Alright, Unit 3, Decision Making. Term objective, the students will be able to determine the classical recognition, primary decision making determination, appropriate instance. This page left the decision break. Alright, decision making during hazmat evidence. If the hazmat material of the response is struggle being procedure of the base for the meaning of the action respond with the tightly divided and driven to the standard operation proceed with the standard operation guidelines of the 1980 with the emergency response phase with the new challenge hazmat lacking significant experience with the hazmat respond with the classic decision making model that was adapted to many agencies module indicated gathering all information you can estimating the possible outcomes listing the options and assessing the options better for the implementing the best option mitigate for the result of the paralysis by analysis. These classic decision-making problems provided problematic when faced with an uncontrolled situation required immediate action. In 1990, the response agency gained more experience with a hazard-based response, risk-based decision-making become with the preventive of the threat of the terrorism force responders to adapt the risk assessment model to address additional chain of the present of the initial event of the summarize with hazard material weapons of the mass destruction events require hazard-based response with risk-based decision-making key components overall risk assessment. Risk assessment had been described with the study vulnerability, threat, likelihood with the consequence of the one of the first step of the risk management process. Stated previously with the concept of the risk-based response with the moment of the hazardous response with the risk-based decision-making systematic process with which the respondents analyze problem involving hazmat, weapon mass destruction, access, the hazard, evaluate the risk, determine the appropriate response action based on the facts, scenes, sciences, circumstances with the incidents of the experience with the response within any of the key component with the process of the risk-based response, agree with the flexibility with which trained, knowledgeable, experience with the responders can operate, experience with the knowledge, and contribute to the efficiency of the risk-based response. You can share your small practical lessons learned will help develop the use of the risk-based response. Recognition prime decision-making model with in contrast classical decision-making model with the classical decision-making is very viable. Time is not critical factor that we cover include with a step-by-step process that can be mapped with a flowchart through for anyone to follow the Rick Klein with a written explanation extensively on the recognition prime decision making in the state with emergency responders. Klein research supports the hypothesis that the emergency responder world of the classic decision making model does not work. Klein book provides evidence of the experience with the primary factor of the effective decision making is growth of the emergency response, evidence to stress the actual and make with the enhanced decision making is one of the Klein's most significant findings, with in addition with the reaching with the provide with the evidence of the critical decision making of the initiate component. I would assume that each of us think that someone, despite training and experience with a poor decision making maker under pressure, some of the individual will make good decisions, a lot less for stress for the situation. 20 years of hazmat restraint provide with the basic experience with the reference for the hazmat weapon mass destruction claims recognition prime decision making, also known as the recognition based precision making, and by some agencies required for the hazmat weapon mass destruction emergency response. The national standard for the hazmat weapon mass destruction is respond with the beginning with a reference to hazard based response risk based decision making as a new standard. Decision phases of the emergency response with which the model is used to understand with the circumstance with the specific decision. Each model will be discussed with the pros and cons for each model will be discussed in detail. Classical decision making. Several classical decision making is again with these models with the analytical problem with the procedurally based on followed by the step by step problem with the process rely with gathering the information problem the facts opinions which is unhappening to determine the option are available with the best option chosen with the option implemented with the course of action. The model has been emergency respond with has include detect, estimate, choose, identify, do, evaluate, as decide, gather information, estimate potential course, harm, detriment, strategical goals, assess act tactical options and resource plan, implementation, action development, decided upon, evaluate, action plan, view strategic goal, or JETA prepare. Risk Response National Fire Association 472 2008 edition recommendation hazmat weapon mass destruction. Risk-based response. Risk-based response systematic process for which response analyze the problem involved with the hazmat weapon mass destruction, assess the hazard, evaluate risk, and determine the appropriate response action based on facts, signs, and circumstances. Incident risk assessment. Risk-based response model effectively. Responders must conduct a risk assessment considering the following factors: threat, hazard, vulnerability, consequent, likelihood, hazard. And the first step of the responder with the must identify with the hazard, exhibit the required with the responder with the head with the presumed with the hazmat weapon mass destruction event. With the hazard may include with the chemical, biological, radiological, nuclear, explosive with the hazard. Chemical with the hazmat weapon mass destruction respond with the gather the information regarding with the chemical property of the chemical with how it harms human animal with the environment discovered with the chemical weapons with material identifies chemical head within the category with the harm body with the military classification include nerve agent with chemical with the effect with the nerve system and the most common so with the chemical with the organophosphate, carbamates, blister agents, although some of the industrial chemicals attack skin, most blister agents over the military warfare agents include mustard, a British warfare agent called lewisite and phosphagen oxime. They work with the damaging of the skin, causing blisters, having the other toxic for the body as well. Blood agents, chemical with the binding and effect of the blood component with the ability of the blood and carry oxygen, similar called chemical asphyxiations. Examples include cyanide gas and aspirin. Choking agent of the chemicals actually respiratory irritant. The chemicals are usually widely in the industry produced with the use of the chlorine, phosphagen, ammonia, but they include the damaged respiratory tract with the test tube destruction causing the narrow carcinogenic pulmonary edema. Incapacitating agents chemical with the primarily control crowd with the opposing troops with long effect with the most common are called riot control agents, except the product of the called maze and tear gas. Biological, they include with the microorganism like bacteria, viruses, such as chemical byproducts produced from the living organisms called toxin. Radiological hazards come with the material release analyzing the radiation, alpha and beta particle for the energy forming gamma and X-ray neutrons. Nuclear head with the nuclear devices include radiation as well with thermal and mechanical harm. So the device for the nuclear bomb, operating nuclear reactor, explosive with the weapon mass destruction, the explosive with the most common, greater than 70% of the weapon mass destruction, instant explosive devices. As weapon explosive devices are made with the energetic chemical that release a tremendous amount of the energy with the activated. When looking at each of the heads of the responder, must consider the following factors regarding hazard product. Any substance involved with the inside of the container, any object hold with the product with the intended location environment, anything that's surrounded with the product with the container that may include with the atmospheric conditions, the transfer of the product and geology with the area cause, what caused the incident to occur, cause of the by maybe negligence, illicit activities initially. Next step of the determining risk of determining vulnerability with a hazard for the one assessing vulnerability hazard, the one must consider the mechanisms of harm that trace me, thermal injuries causing more than many serious include the heat or blast of the fire, cold, chirogenic hazard material with the endothermic reaction, radiological, all life vulnerable or ionization radiation in large dose of the respond with the familiar with the forming ionization reduced, including alpha, beta, gamma, and neutron. And asphyxiation, the placement and exclusion of the oxygen denied by the human body need of the oxygen to survive with the surveyor. Several causes include simple displacement of oxygen over the gas, chemical interference with the oxygen getting itself within the body, many chemicals with a toxicological effect for the body. Many of these chemicals recognized with the poisons, however, the most chemical that could be toxic human given a large enough exposure dose. Etiological exposure to the disease causing organism material error, another mechanism of harming humans. The most responders have been trained bloodborne pathogens by the substance for the isolation perceived the protection against etiological hazards. Mechanical head with always posed with a threat of emergency response, with including operational machinery, traffic explosion, threat, collapse in the damaged buildings, electrical hazard present with the damaged building, other absent emergency site stuff with the hazard similar with the radiation head that cannot see, taste, smell. Then first indication comes after the exposure. What responders understand the mechanism of harm and the next step of the understanding protective measure that can reduce the vulnerability of the harm time, limiting time of the hazard will limit the exposure that I have of the works virtually all have include exposure with the chemical radiation, exposure with the mechanical have like on highway and moving traffic. With a greater distance to harm less likely the exposure of the response mechanism of harm. Shielding many times with the response with the shielding wearing personal protective equipment, however there must be include the shielding behind building heavy equipment to large objects to prevent mechanical harm detection, final detection, critical element of the hazard weapon mass destruction technician is hard to manage mechanism of harm responder cannot identify with the hazard as prevalent detection common in many forms including monitoring instrument. This colorimetric device is similar physical lockouts ability to understand with the many type of the monitoring devices effectively is one of the critical elements separate technician from the responder using understanding monitoring equipment is one of the most challenging skills that has weapon methods and weapon mass destruction. Consequence, the third step of the risk assessment properly evaluate the consequences. If there is any exposure to the hazard, the responder vulnerable to the hazard, responder has to determine the consequence of exposure. will consequently as rated to serve with a moderate and low likelihood. The final component with a likelihood probability with a current somewhat subjective to the judgment person part of the respondent with the basic experience of the decision maker initial versus detailed risk assessment. As there are 2 miles of the decision making, there are 2 miles of the risk assessment for the decision making process. Must complete quickly at the emergency scene with the initial risk assessment. Quick size up with the hazard present will allow the respondent to make a rapid decision. Develop the course of action stated earlier requires the knowledge of the hazard, the experience of the previous events. Subsequent initial risk assets rely heavily upon recognition, prime decision making, rapid assessment, essential basic information elements of the event. A detailed risk assessment should be also conducted with more information becomes available. The detailed assessment is done with a greater depth required with evaluation of all available data. Once it's completed, the initial risk assessment management plan is reviewed just like the other elements for the hazmat weapon mass destruction event. Detailed risk assessment shall be ongoing throughout the incident. Risk management plan should be used, should be up to the constant revision as more information details regarding the hazards obtained. Information basic for the information gathered with the risk assessment profit obtained through the assessment physical data with the emergency response with the train with the conduct with the raise rapid size up with the situation exploded with the physical data with the scene sensitive in which you see here smell fear with the arrival of the incident with the hazmat weapon the master Christian response may have the ability to assist the assessment of the hazard include with the instrument with the monitor with the atmosphere with the computer with the generator prediction with the movement of the vapor cloud with the hazard atmosphere instrumentation also help with the respond with the detect things that cannot be seen with including chemical, electrical, and even radiation. Technical data information gained through the referring the reference to the computer database of the even technical expert with the gathering technical data time consuming and can be overwhelming. Let's have information regarding the cognitive data. These data arrive with the training experience with the store within the brain. However, the information gathered through the sensitive and analyzed, interpreted with the explorated with the cognitive with the data interpretation skills separates hazmat weapon mass destruction technician from specialist. The JDAPR process classic decision-making model of this course may help to determine whether or not standard care is being provided. JDAPR pneumatic device representing the concept. GDAPR gathering information, estimate potential causes of harm, determine strategic goals, assess tactical option, resource plan, implement action, decide upon, evaluate action plan, review strategic goals. For continuing GDAPR relationship with standard care, we need to take about the related concept of the incident command management triangle with the incident command with the precision maker. Incident commander is the initial command system track with the control of the personal equipment of the resource with available to accomplish mission safety and efficiency with the available resource of the incident commander must determine the present potential extent of the incident by evaluating the elements of the hazmat situation. Or some way with the traditional size up curve of the as a fire with the incident command hazmat excellently can achieve the same result, make safe, sound, strategic, tactical decisions such time as the process called the GDAPR can pay off. Gather, show the GDAPR and circle information. Gathering information is one of the most critical steps of the entire operation decision-making management process because of all the subsequent steps of the process depend on the gathered data. With the information, incident commander will be unable to develop the satisfactory strategic goal of the tactical objective. The incident command has insufficient, incorrect information. The incident commander misinterpreted the information, so the strategic goal of the tactical objectives may well be inappropriate and effective, downright lethal. Incident component: the incident with the magnitude, complexity, the respond with the have the potential influx of the physical, the technical data with a very short period within fit time. In fact, with this, so much information may come from the officer that once made it difficult to determine what is or not essential at this point, but they're very helpful to break the incident into components. Most incidents have 4 components to manage hazmat, weapon master. Incident recent requires information about product, environmental container, cause of the incident with these components with the cause are not completely separate, with the independent, with the contrary, with the component, with the indirect, or each other. However, the purpose of the information gathering is very useful separately with examining each component with it separately. Step 2 is estimate potential cause of harm as gathering data with the incident commander makes of the theory with the prediction of the anticipated course of the various aspects of the incident. The incident commander does not do this. He or she will be on an unavailable position playing catch up with the critical incident situation. In fact, for the incident, however, would be managing response, but could lead to the disastrous result if the incident commander does not require sufficient resource for the time and it does not take it into consideration to set up time. Other needs, action, tactical operation predictions should include the minimum following magnitude of the incident, spread of the fire and hazard material, life hazard. Mode of the operation, offensive, the defensive, the non-intervention, impact of the exposures. Include environmental safety factors consideration. 3. Determine the incident object for the incident priorities, life, safety. First priority, incident protect for the life of the include life of the responders. Also, who might affect for the short B problem to get out of hand by steering civilian victims in the area of the incident. With the protection of life, with always with the number one point priority for the hazmat incident, is identified with the incident with the eject for the shovel to respond with the hazmat response team over the after the first responders operation. The first responder with the attempt to rescue themselves have been contaminated to overcome the rescue that may take place over the proper personal protective equipment training. Same whole with the true with the confined space for the rescue. Remember the 60% of the casualties confined space rescue are responders themselves for the incident command committed to the staff of the rescue without proper training, personal protective equipment failed protective of the incident. Priority of the responder just in the prior situation. There are 3 basic questions in the after the rescue. They all based on the risk. The first risk is minimal with the response personnel with the risk of possibility. Second, the risk response equal with the possibility of attempting rescue with the command decision made after assessing the situation. Third is the risk of the response of personnel greater than the possibility of rescue. Attempting the rescue, always a difficult decision. Incident command always be second guessed, and with certain firefighters who wish for the latest attempt to rescue, the possible additional casualties should outweigh the desire to attempt the rescue. Incident command, incident stabilization, property conservation. Second, incident priority, the incident stabilization. Third, incident priority is to protect property environment. The second and third priorities may occur in any order and simultaneously. Only recent years of the task incident priority extend with the protection of the environmental life of the respondent. The increase of the interest in protecting the environment occurred because of the emerging public awareness of the condition and vulnerability of the world, consequently extend of the life of the emergency response seem to evolve slowly. All emergency response agencies have the same basic priority: life safety, incident stabilization, protection both in property with the environment. The priorities are etched in stone. Life safety always are the most important. Safety response is chief top priority. Incident priority for the emergency responder to make the decision, statement of policy, provide the direction, parameters apathetical with the circumstance, with the take with the presence over the during the emergency, the foundation upon which subsequent actions are built. With the order of importance must be the second in nature. First responder is breathing. Or determine the incident object with the goals and tactics. An incident command you will need to develop an appropriate incident object with a strategic goal and tactical object with the decision will be made for the incident priority with the typical life with the safety, incident stabilization, property conservation. Minimum you will need with the information product container environment to call for the incident before the appropriate actions can be initiated. Some of the incidents may be recognized long term, most likely to multiple operational period with the incident, however, the handle with the local event level incident with the first responder with a hand with long duration. So the overall incident objective may be different than the current operational period with the strategic goal. During the next operational period with the strategic goals may change while working toward the overall incident objectives. For the majority incident that has material involved, the will command with the incident with the object for the strategic goal, the will be the same with the strategic goals with the hazard of the material incident typical with the include with the minimum isolation, notification, identification, protection, spill control, leak control, fire control, termination for incident that may have the criminal intent with the crime scene. Crime scene preservation also must be considered. Incident objectives, broad scope of the statement of the exposure of the accomplished for in order to stabilize the incident with the return of the area normal. Typical with the strategic goal listed previously with the major long-term incident with thus over the broadly based for the nature, maybe specifically isolation, notification, and so on. Strategic goals. A broad scale of the statement they expect for the accomplishment for the specifically order of the accomplishment. Strategic goals may provide with the estimate established for the appropriate isolation of the incident, extinguishing fire, stop the leak, contain the spill, terminate the incident. Strategic goals do not include the tactics needed to accomplish with the goal of fire suppression or one strategic goal of the rescue and remove the occupant safely. Tactical objective may be the rescue of the team conducted for the primary reason for another. Tactical objective may include fire containment of the ventilation scene, lighting, and so on. The tactical objective of the gear toward the accomplishment of the strategic goal rescue, remove the occupant safely. Tactical objective is specifically managed for the definement that happens and what to do with the conditions associated with the assignment. Spill product with the typical tactical objective of the accomplishment of the strategic goal of spill control would be the spill control team to construct the underflow of the dam and the 100-foot downstream of the spill within 30 minutes wearing personal protective equipment, self-contained, and breathing apparatus, and stay out of the product. Have the objective often will describe the A, audience, B, behavior expect with the C, any condition associated with the assignment, to what degree to such time. Task method as the procedure for the restaurant with deploy with the accomplished for the tactical objective, example, the underflow dam management, They will use pipes out of the bottom of the ditch and sand soil to fill the ditch above the pipe, some type of the control method. On pipes, control flow, allow for the product to rise to the pipe and the water beneath the product to flow over the pipe. The following are brief descriptions of the hazmat object for the strategic goal, for the tactical objective, for the task methods, accomplish the mission, and objective for the strategic goal, for the isolate with the incident command, with the provide with the civilian responder safety, tactical objective with the isolation group, with the quorum with the recommendation, Department of Training with the North American Emergency Response Guide by established incident zone, initiate evacuation procedure for appropriate distance, wearing with the personal protectives and SCABA, self-controlled breathing apparatus within 30 minutes. Test method of the isolation group will leave the barrier tape with the mark without the perimeter warn the zone within 30 minutes. Public address system of the apparatus initiate the initial evacuation work with the incident command site of control lead with the restricted entry with the incident command. Incident objective with the strategic goal to define with the broad-based outcome. Tactical objective with the very clearly and concise, measurable, specific, accomplished with the reach of the variable design with it can identify A, B, C, and D elements. Audience isolation group B and the National Emergency Response Guidebook. Determine isolation zone, initial evacuation, proceed with the condition wearing personal protective self-contained breathing apparatus. Then degree 30 minutes. Interactive objective for the strategic goal, elimination and ignition source for the area contained with the overturned vehicle for the spill controls. Tactical objective with the vapor control group. Leave with the appropriate age for the material to provide serve for the covering with the flame of the liquid leaking with the container as well with the container itself. Within 10 minutes, maintaining blanket with wearing full personal equipment, self-controlled breathing apparatus upwind with the incident. Task method the upping using Class A foam application device with the engine one, applying with the blanket over the product with the container, applying the often needed to maintain with the blanket foam. Incident objective with the strategic goal to define with the broad-based outcome of the tactical objective with the wear and concise with the measurable specific accomplishment. Accomplishable with the reach for the able to sign with can identify the A, B, C, and D elements. Audience very capable control group B, apply foam tank, blanket, product, container, and maintain. Condition full personal protective self-controlled breathing apparatus work with the upwind direction, degree 10 minutes. Alright, incident objective with the isolate with the incident scheme with the evaluate the 20 block area with the strategic goal of operation respond with evacuate 10 blocks adjacent with the incident scene within Merrill, including Memorial Hospital. Technical objective evacuation branch for the next 6 hours. The will evacuate the Memorial Hospital 10 block area surrounding the incident scene. Sending evacuees to shelter the National Guard Army wearing personal protective SCABA. A self-control breathing apparatus list will be developed with each of the address staff and some of the evacuation notification. Task method. The evacuation group of the evacuation branch will be assigned with a division A, B, C, and D with the door-to-door directing as evacuation. Each of the group will give them a portable PA system ID tag with a place at the exterior of the door buildings. Check the occupants notified. Group 5, 6, and 7 of the evacuation branch assigned to the Pacific Evacuation Memorial Hospital work with the direction facility director. Overall incidents evacuated 20 blocks adjacent from the incident of the strategic goal of the operation period to divide broad-based outcome of the evacuation 10 block for the hospital tactical project with the clear concise with the measurable specifically accomplished for the reach of the able to assign due to complexity of the tactical objective with the evacuation branch created with the 7 groups that signed with the branch director can identify A, B, C, and D elements. Audience evacuation branch 7 groups B evacuator block area of the hospital with the list of the address for the actions taken in each of the locations. C condition wearing personal protective self-controlled breathing apparatus 6 hours. Terminations include both field administrative function for the need restore operations for their normal staff. Include the operation will cover the issue of the replenishment supply of all the administrative activities. Issue with the typical with the include with the debriefing hold with the critique for the following up the area with the improvement that can be made with the critique with the required in the Title 29 CFR 1910 120 QC2 Employers Emergency Response Plan as part of the critical all respond with the provided health sign, the symptoms associated with the material involved with the information gained with the material safety dash, local health offices, computer database with other technical reference, source of the information, chemical transportation, emergency center, chemtrack, incident after action, we respond to the incidents are critical to document happened, what actions we took, we were assigned tasks, cruel observation during the response with the assigned to the prepare after action report importance, they gather all record tapes, incident data early of the incident is possible to respond you for the form record their actions, you for the incident command system, forms they will be valuable assets for your task. Step 4, assess the option for the reach for the incident command, choose the appropriate of the incident for the jack with particular incident for the specific strategy, tactics for the Objective that may be dependent with additional resource for the need to be accomplished with the specific tactic to become evident with the resource for the insufficient competence specific strategic and instant command must be able to require with the resource for the timely way must achieve with another strategy. For example, during a wildland fire with the nature for the stand with a mixed pine with the fur with the instant command determine the confinement of the one over the instant objective with the other possible strategy to achieve the goal with the confinement of the cut the fire break along the ridge of the butt using a bulldozer to estimate that the fire will reach the bridge about 2.5 hours. Conditions don't change with the instant command learns that the closest available bulldozer will take 2 hours to reach the bridge and require with another 45 minutes to cut the break. In this case, it is necessary to choose an alternative strategy. Exposure. Examine the possible strategy with the 6 general except for the Hazmat incident objective with the explode with the methods of the reach of the accomplishment. Each objective is order. Important to repeat the order of the goal for the objective of the curve that does not represent priority. In fact, multiple objectives that may exist simultaneously with various possible tactical objectives. Each of the 6 instant objectives game of the 6 goals: isolation, notification, identification, protection, control, and termination. Step 5. Planning and implementing actions. The appropriate tactical option to the merge of the attainable with the instant action plan. Start with develop the minimum incident action plan. Most containing the following 11 elements. Have the risk of the strategic goal, the tactical objective, the control objective, assignment, general safety message, weather, the condition, communication plan, medical plan, site diagram, traffic plan. Instant commands begin with a put together specific series of activities. Assign personnel with the action plan. Begins a mental plan. However, especially with the complex long situation command, will train with a written plan with the vitally important, particularly with the instant action plan. Start with the take shape. One of the most effective and efficient methods available to implementing chosen plan action. Provide with the method which the instant commander can direct and control all resources available to need the goal for the initiative and achieve goals and objectives specified in the plan action. Planning process is an ongoing process that never stops with the instant of the declare over the planning with the section responsible for the organizer perform the planning section may be subdivided in units. Situation demand the units may include situation unit with the along with the breast of the situation resource unit with the track all resource field observer to keep planning section informed. Link with the time the unit of the individual allow for the operator to depend with a specified time with here the major work division environment. Entry term to the more only make with the 2 entry of the per day with a hot zone with the more instance for the time of the hot zone depends on the air supply. Major work division includes reconnaissance team, leakage stop with the spill containment, the fire control spill neutralization. Planning section responsible for playing these events with ensure that the instant command have the necessary personnel available to accomplish goal. As soon as possible, the instant planning section conduct with the planning meeting to determine the necessary elements of the instant action plan, produce the plans based on strategic goals of the instant command safety officer for the review of the plan and for the approval after the approval of all the division group supervisor briefing on the plan. Or step 6, evaluating instant action control plan. For the instant action plan, the instant commander must evaluate the determine effectiveness instant command, verify the strategic goal, for the appropriate for the goal, safety to respond with the instant stabilization, protection, property evidence for the environment, instant command, determine the tactical objective, the appropriate for the meeting, the goal, to confirm sufficient personnel with available equipment and other resources for the adequate for the instant command, to decide whether the methods selected to be accomplished for the objective are efficient and safe, estimate the result of applying the methods, 7, and review. In the event of the instant command does not progress toward the desired outcome, the strategic goal does not meet the test incident chain with the commonly occur with a long operation. Instant command must review the original plan, review the process involved with the examination of every step of the process, the start of the gathering information, some of the vital pieces, information missing with the link with the operation radical chain with the situation, estimate for the incidents continue course based on some of the inaccurate, outdated, unknown information, whether the incident potential underestimated, overestimated the incident object with the appropriate word with the wrong strategies chosen to meet the objective of the resource with the need with the gather anticipated. If it answers some of the questions you have, the instant command may face with a very difficult task, such for the situation and complement the safety operational personnel with the final outcome of the incident with good managers will not shy away the consulting operation command and staff personnel to identify the specific problem. The problem may result in the insufficient feedback with the operating personnel who have indicated change of the condition of the brief of the constellation could remedy the problem. Once review process complete with the instant command, identify the modified version of incident action plan. Again, with the process evaluation, evaluation must continue with the modified plans to meet the intended objectives. The GEDA are a simpler product with the model within provide with the instant command scientifically tool need with the critical incident judgments, consequently, systematically overall incident management process. The incident action plan defined with the methodology accomplished at the end of the hazmat incident command meeting with the incorporating a site safety plan with the following established standard operating procedure for the plan must be specifically efficient, effective, and flexible. 72. Decision-making model that attributed to the recognition primary decision-making with classical decision-making. The purpose of the code of the classical decision-making will use the GED DAPER process of the GE DAPER process of the decision-making tool, essentially for the safe and efficient response with the Hazardous instant command need of the comprehensive guide to ensure that no one overlooks the absence of the response with the plan must exist for incident command. Other plans must develop the incident progress of the workload of the data include and though the overall incident command is a hazmat response until the delegate takes various plans of the incident command to do with just that, the plan themselves delegate the roles of the response of the incident command who plans response, works the plan, and consequently reviews it, revises it as needed the command much safer and more efficient response. And that is the reading of Unit 3 Decision Making, Hazmat Material Incident Management Testing.